Episode 3 of The Bad Batch may have just referenced something almost no one saw coming. The episode is titled Replacements, referring to the Empire replacing clone troopers with conscripted soldiers. No longer in need of the clones, the loyal clones we all love, they're going for the stupid bucketheads. What a great decision that was. Which we all know is what eventually happens, of course. No clones in the original trilogy, only kissing siblings. That's where it's at. That's the amount of, brother and sisterhood that goes on. The idea of replacing all clones with conscripts means that these guys here, the Kaminoans, are no longer needed. They become obsolete. The cost of creating a new clone army for the Empire is too expensive when compared to training soldiers willing to put their hands up and fight for the Empire. And plus, the Empire are currently building a ginormous super weapon, so they're probably, putting more money into that than into their new troops. Let's just make one big thing rather than millions of little guys. Anyway, therefore, the Kaminoans need to come up with a plan soon if they're to stay in business, which, after all, seems to be all they really care about. Giant intergalactic war is great for these guys because it means more money. Need an army of millions created over a 10-year period? That's what these guys are there for, cashing in. They may appear to be calm and soothing, but they're really just filthy rich businessmen with long necks. Hey everyone, it's Andrew. So late into episode 3 of The Bad Batch, Lama Su, Kamino's prime minister, and Nala Se, the clone's doctor and scientist, have a conversation which is possibly the most interesting thing from the entire show so far because of what it will potentially lead to. Nala Se comments on how the Jango Fett DNA used to create the entire clone army continues to degrade, meaning very soon the Kaminoans won't be able to create any more Jango Fett clones. What does this mean? Well, there's probably only so many times they can use the DNA and copy it over and over and over and over again before it starts to lose its original genetic structure. Copying something over and over again eventually creates imperfections, right? Meaning new clones created with the DNA won't be of the same quality as the older clones. Either that or the DNA has just been sitting in the fridge a little too long and is starting to go off, getting a funny smell. There's some weird green stuff growing on it. Time to chuck it out, get some new stuff in the fridge. Alright, so once he learns of this information, Lama Su says it's time to begin the next phase, as in phase 3 clones. We had phase 1 and phase 2, so now are we moving into phase 3? They're changing the helmets again. Is that what's going on? Lama Su then proposes that if Nala Se's experiment can yield a superior clone, then it will secure the Kaminoans' relationship with the Empire, meaning they'll be back in business, able to, keep that cash flow coming in, keep the filthy rich money in their wallets, and they'll be able to create more high-quality clones without a need for conscripted soldiers for the Empire. But what is this cloning experiment they're talking about? What is the next phase? Well, Nala Se says that such a contingency can't be created without a direct source, meaning her new clone experiment won't work unless the Kaminoans find a new original DNA sample, as in someone to replace Jango Fett's DNA and create a new army. So who would that new source be? Where will the Kaminoans find a new original source? I mean, there's, dozens of bounty hunters going around. Why not just choose a new bounty hunter? Remember, Jango's got a son, Boba Fett. I guess Boba's a clone, thus you can't use Boba. But anyway, what Nala Se says next is where things get confusing. She says the clones required will not return willingly. What does that mean? As in the clones required for her new cloning experiment? As in she's planning to take the DNA from a superior clone and use that DNA to create a new clone army? And for some reason, those specific clones she needs won't return to Kamino for some reason because, Order 66, the Empire are there. What's going on here? I guess there's only a few clones she could be referring to, right? My first guess is the Bad Batch because of their enhanced genetic mutations. Nala Se wishes to take their DNA and use it as a new source for a new army. The only clone who's currently within their reach is Crosshair, who currently still resides on Kamino and has taken the side of the Empire due to his inhibitor chip. Lama Su then says the clones are Kaminoan property and we only need one, which again, to me, seems like they're referring to Crosshair. They need one donor, one host to create a new clone army. They wish to take his mutated DNA, study it, understand his enhanced skills, and use that as the base structure for a new clone army to impress the Empire and stay in business, as Lama Su says.
Our survival hinges on it.
I can't wait until the Bad Batch get to meet up with Crosshair, because I think their encounter will come with a major twist. During this episode, we see the Bad Batch sadly reminiscing about Crosshair after finding his weapon box on board their ship. They talk about the old days, how he turned with the inhibitor chip, he became evil. At some point, the Bad Batch will be reunited with Crosshair, or rather, will meet Crosshair in battle on the opposite side. And then, after meeting Crosshair, we'll get a reveal of not one, but dozens, possibly thousands of Crosshair clones. Because the Kaminoans have been cloning him. That's the big reveal, that's the surprise. My goodness. Suddenly, we thought there was just one, there's thousands of them. Now, although Crosshair seems like the most likely template, perhaps the Kaminoans are referring to other highly ranked clones to be used as templates. There are a few other names that come to mind outside of the Bad Batch that, in the words of Nala say, won't return willingly. How about Captain Rex? Although he's just a Jango Fett clone, he's had more experience than possibly any other clone in the Republic, and been on the front line with lots of prominent Jedi. I'm not sure a clone's experiences contribute to their DNA sample, whether that makes him a better candidate than others, but surely if they're looking at cloning more clones, they'd be looking at some of the most decorated candidates. What about other commanders? Cody, Gregor, Delta Squad, who knows? Now, before I get to what I think is the most exciting possibility of who these experimental clones might reintroduce into Star Wars, I just want to talk about the possibility of who these new clones will become and what they'll be used for. I think it's possible these new experimental clones will be used by the Empire for a very specific purpose, and will possibly explain the origins of a pre-existing Star Wars trooper class. Like I said, we all know the Empire eventually decides to go with conscripted soldiers and abolish the Kaminoan cloning program. But with Kaminoans trying to impress and find a new elite clone template, it's possible these new clones will be used by the Empire as an elite trooper class, such as Purge Troopers. We know that some of the original Purge Troopers were Jango Fett clones who were just following their inhibitor chip programming, and other Purge Troopers were specifically trained conscripted soldiers. They came later. But what if others were also created from these experimental clones? Or perhaps even an early version of Death Troopers or Shadow Troopers. There are so many special trooper units created for the Empire, and lots of them have kind of, sketchy origins. We don't know too much about them. Sure, Death Troopers are supposed to be specifically trained stormtroopers with scrambled comms, that's why they talk funny, but what if some of them came out of the Kaminoans' experimental cloning program? What if they're a specially created team of clones that we don't even really know are clones until now, with DNA taken from either Crosshair or another elite clone? Just a thought. Alright, but now to the big one. There's one other candidate for the experimental clones who the Kaminoans could be referring to. Even though he's not Kaminoan property, I think there is a chance we could be about to see Starkiller reintroduced into Star Wars canon. So when Disney bought Lucasfilm for what seems like a really cheap price of $4.05 billion, I mean, The Force Awakens earned over $2 billion on its own at the box office. But anyway, when they bought Lucasfilm, they removed a lot of content from the Star Wars canon, what's considered canon, because they wanted to create their own stories, right? Like Jedi Fallen Order, like the sequel trilogy, all the other content that's come since. And the Force Unleashed games were some of the content that now falls into Star Wars Legends. So the Bad Batch is the perfect platform and opportunity to reintroduce Starkiller, or some version of this character, back into Star Wars canon. It's set in the right era, at the right point in the timeline, after Order 66. We're on Kamino, we're talking about cloning. It's possible the experimental cloning program the Kaminoans are referring to could involve some form of Jedi cloning, or the cloning of a Force-sensitive character anyway, which is kind of getting into X1 and X2 territory from the cancelled Battlefront 3 story. Made a few videos about that hilarious train wreck you can watch here. These two were clones from a Jedi who were, like commanders in the Empire. Now, the problem with Galen Marek, or Starkiller, is that in the games, he was ridiculously overpowered. I mentioned in my last video, George Lucas ended up hating his character because he basically breaks Star Wars. He's too powerful, does too much, and overpowers Vader, which no one likes to see. He was the apprentice of Darth Vader, trained from a young age in the ways of the dark side, and in the first game, you'd play as Starkiller hunting down surviving Jedi and learning about Galen's twisted past. Anyway, Galen Marek was eventually betrayed several times and then killed, but Vader kept cloning him over and over again until the cloning process was successful and an even stronger Starkiller was born. Although, as with each clone of Starkiller, this Starkiller was haunted by visions and memories from his previous life, and he was never fully devout to Vader. He never followed Vader as much as Vader wanted. There was betrayal. Good games. Go play them. Now, there was also another clone known as the Dark Clone, a perfect version of Starkiller who was able to put aside the memories and visions and remained loyal to Vader. So I feel like with these characters, there's a lot of room here for the Bad Batch writers to play around and perhaps even introduce some sort of Force-sensitive clone back into the story. Even if it's not Starkiller or if it's a nerfed Starkiller, it's exciting to think that this is what the Kaminoans' experiment could be. The Kaminoans are surely up to something major and they're really looking to impress the Empire. There's a lot of possibilities of what they could be doing, but the cloning of a Force-sensitive character is something that's come up every now and then over the past 10, 15 years in Star Wars, and it's something I think we'd all love to see brought into the Bad Batch in some way. Perfect time, perfect location, we're talking about the right topics, let's get it done. Okay, so there is one more template I can think of that the Kaminoan cloners may be after, and she's possibly the biggest mystery of the Bad Batch so far, Omega. At this point, we still know very little about Omega, apart from the fact she's an enhanced clone with a seemingly heightened state of awareness. It doesn't seem like she's a clone molded from the Jango Fett template. We don't really know anything about her origins yet, apart from the fact she was born and raised and only has ever been to Kamino before the events of the Bad Batch. And in the first episode, Nala Se seemed to be very protective of Omega, so obviously there's something special about her, and the scientist, Nala Se, wants to keep her close. But whatever that is yet to be revealed. So, will the Kaminoans try capture Omega and use her as a clone template for a new clone army? Is she Force sensitive? All part of the experiment the Kaminoans are referring to. Will the Bad Batch be hunted down for the specific reason of capturing Omega? Looking forward to actually learning who she is and why she's so special. I'd love to know what you guys think. Are the Kaminoans going to clone Crosshair or another clone or a Force sensitive character? Let me know your thoughts down below. And lots more Bad Batch on the way coming soon, so stay tuned for that. You can watch one of these here as well. And follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and join my Discord for lots more Star Wars gaming, news, shows, updates, everything else. And thanks for watching this. My name's Andrew. I'll catch you soon.
Stay bombastic.